The year was 2347, and humanity had spent 3 decades as the laughingstock of the galaxy. When Earth first made contact with the Galactic Confederation, the alien species had looked at humans and seen nothing but weak creatures who had barely learned to leave their own solar system. A proud reptilian species with scaled blue skin and cold yellow eyes had claimed human space as their territory without even bothering to fight for it. The Empire, conquerors with sharp mandibles and 6 arms each, had set up blockades around Earth's trade routes and strangled human commerce. The Collective, a hive-minded species of telepaths who shared one consciousness across billions of bodies, had stood before the Galactic Council and declared that humanity was unworthy of membership. For 30 years, humans had tried diplomacy. They had sent ambassadors who came back humiliated. They had offered trade deals that were rejected with laughter. They had asked for protection from pirates and raiders, only to be told that inferior species did not deserve protection. The aliens saw humans as nothing more than animals who had somehow stumbled upon space travel. But humanity had a secret. Admiral Jack stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned USS Sovereign and looked out at the stars through the main viewport. He was 62 years old with silver hair cropped short in military fashion. His eyes had witnessed 2 interstellar wars and countless skirmishes. He had buried friends and watched colonies burn. He understood better than anyone what this vessel represented. The USS Sovereign was not just a ship. It was the answer to every insult and every dismissal that humanity had endured. The Sovereign was the first of the Hurricane-class battleships, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The vessel stretched 4 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapon systems that alien scientists would have called impossible. Its hull was made from materials that Earth had never shared with the galactic community. Its engines could outrun anything in known space. Its shields could withstand bombardments that would destroy planets. Commander Lisa approached the Admiral with a data pad in her hands. She was 40 years old with auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a reputation for tactical brilliance that had earned her the position of second-in-command. Her face was grim as she handed him the report. "Admiral, they have destroyed another colony transport," she said. 17,000 civilians were on board, men, women, and children. The commander sent a message to Earth afterward. He called it pest control. Felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "Get me the Joint Chiefs on a secure channel." While the aliens had spent decades mocking humanity, Earth's greatest minds had been working in secret. Hidden facilities on moons and asteroids had developed technologies that surpassed anything in the galaxy. Engineers had studied every alien species and learned their weaknesses. Scientists had designed weapons specifically to counter each threat. The Hurricane-class battleship was the result of 15 years of secret development and humanity's burning desire to never be victims again. Chief Engineer Sam Porter walked onto the bridge to give his report. He was a stocky man with grease-stained hands and an encyclopedic knowledge of every system on the ship. He had personally overseen the installation of the dark matter reactor that powered the Sovereign, a reactor that produced more energy than some stars. "All systems are operating at full capacity, Admiral," Porter said. "She is ready to show them what humanity can build." Lieutenant Kate Bradley stood at the weapons station, running final checks on systems that could devastate entire fleets. She was young for her position, only 35, but her skills with targeting systems were unmatched. She had calibrated every plasma cannon, every rail gun, and every missile launcher to specifications that would make alien weapons officers weep with envy. "Weapons are hot and ready, sir," Bradley reported. "Just give the word." The orders came through from Earth Command an hour later. The Joint Chiefs had made their decision. Humanity would no longer hide. Humanity would no longer beg. Humanity would no longer accept being treated as vermin to be exterminated at the convenience of alien empires. Admiral activated the ship-wide communication system, and his voice echoed through every corridor and every compartment of the massive vessel. 8,000 men and women stopped what they were doing to listen. "This is Admiral," he began. "For 30 years the galaxy has told us that we do not belong among the stars. They have burned our colonies. They have killed our people. They have called us pests and animals and primitives. They believe that humanity is weak. They believe that we will accept any abuse because we have no choice." He paused and looked around the bridge at the faces of his officers. He saw determination in their eyes and anger that had been building for decades. "Today we prove them wrong," continued. "Today we stop running and we stop begging. Today the galaxy learns that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are not weak. We are the storm that they never saw coming, and when we are finished, no one will ever mistake human kindness for human weakness again." The crew responded with a roar of approval that shook the bulkheads. Officers at their stations checked their equipment one final time. Soldiers in the armory loaded their weapons. Pilots climbed into their fighters and prepared for launch. Commander looked at the navigation console and then back at the Admiral. "Course is set for the border, sir. Their fleet of 200 ships is waiting at the edge of their territory. They think they are there to intimidate us." Allowed himself a small smile that held no warmth. "Then let us go and introduce ourselves properly." The USS Sovereign powered its massive engines, and the stars outside the viewport stretched into lines as the ship jumped into hyperspace. The journey would take only a few hours, and when it was complete, the galaxy would learn that everything it believed about humanity was wrong. They had called the destruction of 17,000 civilians pest control. They had laughed as they sent the message to Earth. They had expected humanity to cower and accept the loss as they had accepted every other loss. They had no idea what was coming for them. The border fleet consisted of 200 warships arranged in a formation that was designed to inspire terror. Each vessel was larger than anything humanity had ever fielded in combat. Their hulls were covered in spikes, and sharp edges meant to intimidate lesser species. Their weapons had burned worlds and ended civilizations. For 3 centuries, the sight of a fleet had meant surrender or death for anyone who faced them. Overlord commanded this fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Claw of Extinction. He was old even by standards, with a carapace from dozens of battles and mandibles that had personally torn apart the leaders of 3 different species. He had requested this assignment because he wanted to be the one to finally crush humanity. He wanted his name attached to their extinction. When his sensors detected a single vessel emerging from hyperspace, made a sound that served as laughter among his kind. It was a rapid clicking of mandibles that echoed across the bridge of his ship. "One ship," he said to his officers. "The humans send one ship to face the might of the Empire. They are even more foolish than I believed." His communication officer opened a channel to the entire fleet and addressed his captains. "Do not destroy them quickly. I want to hear them scream. I want to record their terror and send it back to Earth so that the rest of their pathetic species knows what awaits them." The fleet began to move forward, surrounding the lone human vessel like predators circling wounded prey. On the bridge of the USS Sovereign, Admiral watched the alien ships approach on the tactical display. 200 red icons moved to encircle his single green icon. The odds would have seemed impossible to anyone who did not know what the Hurricane class could do. Lieutenant Bradley looked up from her weapons console with eager eyes. "Admiral, they are in range. All weapon systems are locked on targets." Held up his hand. "Not yet, Lieutenant. Let them fire first. I want the galaxy to know who started this fight. I want every species watching to see that we gave them the chance to turn back." Commander understood the strategy. "You want this recorded. You want proof that they attacked first." "When we are finished here, there will be those who claim we were the aggressors," said. "The recording will show the truth. They had 200 ships. We had 1. They chose to attack." The fleet reached optimal firing range and Overlord gave the order. 200 ships opened fire at once, and space around the Sovereign erupted in a storm of plasma bolts and laser beams. The combined firepower of the fleet could have cracked a moon in half. It could have reduced a city to ash in seconds. It struck the Sovereign's shields with enough force to light up the darkness of space like a small sun. The Sovereign did not even shudder. On the flagship, sensors showed that the human ship was completely undamaged. Clicking laughter died in his throat as he stared at the display in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "Fire again, all ships fire everything." The fleet unleashed another barrage, and then another. They fired until their weapon capacitors began to overheat. They launched missiles that carried warheads designed to pierce the strongest armor in the galaxy. Nothing worked. The human ship sat in the center of their formation like a rock in a stream, unmoved and unharmed. Admiral nodded to his weapons officer. "Now, Lieutenant Bradley, show them what a hurricane can do." Kate Bradley had waited her entire career for this moment. Her fingers moved across the console with practiced precision, and the Sovereign came alive with deadly purpose. The rail guns fired first. These weapons used electromagnetic force to launch tungsten slugs at 1/10 the speed of light. The slugs were small, only a meter long, but at that velocity they carried more kinetic energy than nuclear warheads. They punched through hulls like needles through paper, entering one side of a ship and exiting the other in an instant. Plasma lances activated next. These were beams of superheated matter that burned at temperatures hotter than the surface of stars. They swept across the formation in wide arcs, cutting through ships like blades through flesh. Vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were sliced in half, their halves drifting apart as atmosphere and crew spilled into the void. Missile swarms launched from the Sovereign's bays. Each warhead carried an antimatter payload that detonated with the force of small stars. The explosions consumed entire squadrons of ships, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it was over, 200 warships had been reduced to debris. Wreckage tumbled through space in every direction. Escape pods launched from dying vessels, their occupants too shocked to understand what had happened. The greatest military force they had ever assembled at a single location had been annihilated by one human ship. Commander stared at her sensor display with something between satisfaction and awe. 200 enemy vessels destroyed, Admiral. We have sustained minor damage to outer hull plating. Casualties are 0. Chief Engineer Porter confirmed from his station. All systems remain at full operational capacity. We can do this again whenever you want. Only one ship had survived the destruction. The claw of extinction had been shielded from the worst of the attack by the wreckage of its own fleet. Overlord sat on his bridge, surrounded by the bodies of officers who had been killed by exploding consoles. His ship was crippled and drifting, but its communication system still functioned. His transmission came through to the Sovereign, his mandibles clicking with terror instead of arrogance. "What are you?" demanded. "What kind of monsters are you?" Admiral leaned toward the communication array and spoke with a calm voice that carried no anger and no mercy. "We are humanity. You called the murder of our civilians pest control. You laughed as you sent us the message. You thought we would do nothing because we were weak." Paused and let the silence stretch. "We are not weak, Overlord. We were patient. There is a difference, and we are just getting started." The Sovereign's forward batteries targeted the claw of extinction. One shot was all it took. The flagship that had destroyed civilizations vanished in a flash of light, and Overlord joined the list of those who had underestimated humanity. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The Empire had lost its entire border fleet to a single human vessel in less than 5 minutes. For the first time in 30 years, alien species began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The destruction of the border fleet sent shockwaves across every corner of the galaxy. Species that had ignored humanity for decades suddenly demanded emergency sessions of the Galactic Council. Ambassadors who had laughed at human diplomats now screamed at each other in the great halls of the Council station, trying to understand how everything they believed had been proven wrong in less than 5 minutes. They were the first to call for united action. High Commander stood before the council with his blue scales rippling in agitation and his yellow eyes wide with fear he could not hide. "The humans have built a weapon that makes our fleets obsolete," he declared. "If we do not act together, they will destroy us one by one. We must put aside our differences and unite against this common threat." The collective spoke next through one of their drones, a pale humanoid figure that served as a mouthpiece for the hive mind. "We have attempted to probe the minds of humans aboard their vessel. Our telepaths cannot penetrate their mental defenses. They have developed shielding against our greatest weapon. This species is more dangerous than we understood." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy agreed to set aside centuries of rivalry and mistrust. The survivors joined despite their humiliation. The committed their entire fleet. The pledged every ship they possessed. 17 other species added their forces to the alliance. They called themselves the Coalition of Unified Defense, and their single purpose was to destroy the Hurricane-class battleship before it could threaten there. Admiral received intelligence about the coalition from Commander Torres, the Sovereign's intelligence officer. Torres was young for his position at barely 30 years old, but his ability to intercept and decode alien communications had made him invaluable. He had spent weeks monitoring enemy transmissions and piecing together their plans. "They are assembling the largest fleet in galactic history," Torres reported to the Admiral. "Over 3,000 ships from 20 different species. Carriers, mine ships, dreadnoughts and vessels from a dozen other species we have never faced in combat. They are planning to ambush us at the Nexus Gate." Commander pulled up a star chart on the main display. The Nexus Gate was a natural hyperspace junction, a point where the fabric of space was thin enough to allow travel between a dozen major trade routes. It was the most strategically important location in the galaxy. Whoever controlled the Nexus Gate controlled commerce and travel across known space. 3,000 ships," said quietly. "Even the Sovereign has limits, Admiral. We proved ourselves against 200. This is 15 times that number." Chief Medical Officer Dr. Amy had been listening from the side of the bridge. She was a calm woman whose steady hands had saved countless lives during combat situations, but even she looked concerned. "Admiral, I have faith in this ship and this crew," she said. "But 3,000 is not a number we can ignore. If we lose, Earth is defenseless." Allowed a small smile to cross his weathered face. "Who said we were going alone?" He activated a secure communication channel that connected him to 4 other vessels scattered across human space. 4 faces appeared on the screen, each one wearing the uniform of a Hurricane-class captain. "Ladies and the Coalition has given us an opportunity we could not have created ourselves. They are gathering every ship they have at a single location. If we defeat them there, the galaxy will have nothing left to threaten us with." Captain Ben Carter of the USS Tempest nodded grimly. He was a former Marine with a shaved head and arms covered in scars from hand-to-hand combat. "Tempest is ready, Admiral. My crew has been waiting for this." Captain Dawson of the USS Cyclone spoke next. She was known for her tactical precision and her ability to find weaknesses in any enemy formation. "Cyclone is operational and eager to prove herself." Captain commanded the USS Thunderbolt. He was the most aggressive of the Hurricane-class captains, always pushing for direct confrontation. "Just point us at the enemy, Admiral. We will do the rest." Captain Laura Price of the USS Maelstrom was the quietest of the group, but also the most methodical. "Maelstrom stands ready. No enemy will escape our engagement zone. felt pride swell in his chest as he looked at his captains. These were the finest officers humanity had ever produced, commanding the most powerful warships in existence. "The Coalition believes they are setting a trap for one ship," told them. "They have no idea that 5 Hurricane-class battleships exist. We will arrive together and we will fight together. When this battle is over, the galaxy will never again underestimate humanity." The 5 vessels began their journey to the Nexus Gate from different points across human space. They traveled through hyperspace in complete radio silence to prevent the enemy from detecting their movements. The Coalition had spies watching human territory, but they only knew about the Sovereign. The other 4 ships were ghosts that the aliens did not know existed. On the Sovereign, preparations for battle continued without rest. Chief Engineer Porter ran diagnostic after diagnostic on every system, ensuring that nothing would fail at the critical moment. Lieutenant Bradley conducted targeting drills with her weapons teams until they could fire in their sleep. Commander Torres monitored enemy communications for any changes to the Coalition plan. Doctor prepared her medical bay for mass casualties that she hoped would never come. She had 800 beds ready and surgeons standing by. The Hurricane class was powerful, but no ship was invincible, and she refused to be caught unprepared. Admiral spent the hours before battle reviewing tactical data and studying the capabilities of every species they would face. He knew they relied on fighter swarms. He knew they would attempt telepathic attacks. He knew the survivors would fight with desperate fury. Each enemy had strengths and weaknesses, and he had planned for all of them. When the Sovereign finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Gate system, the other 4 Hurricane-class vessels arrived at the same moment. The Coalition fleet, 3,000 ships arranged in a defensive formation around the gate, detected the arrivals on their sensors. For one long moment, the galaxy held its breath. 5 human warships faced 3,000 alien vessels. The numbers should have meant nothing but certain death for the humans, but the Coalition commanders felt something they had never experienced before as they stared at their sensor displays. They felt doubt. Admiral opened a channel to all 5 ships and spoke the words that would begin the bloodiest battle in galactic history. "All vessels, this is Admiral, remember what they called us. Remember every colony they burned and every life they took. Today we answer. Today they learn, attack." The Hurricane fleet surged forward, and the sky around the Nexus Gate lit up with the fires of war. The Battle of Nexus Gate began with the Coalition commanders screaming orders at their fleets. They had expected 1 human ship. They had received 5. 3,000 vessels scrambled to adjust their formations as the Hurricane fleet closed the distance with terrifying speed. High Commander and of the was the first to recover from his shock. He commanded the largest portion of the Coalition fleet, and he refused to let fear paralyze him. "Launch all fighters," he ordered. "Swarm them, overwhelm their point defenses. Even these demons cannot track 1,000,000 targets at once." Carriers opened their bays and released clouds of fighters that darkened the space around them. Each fighter was small and fast, piloted by a single warrior trained from birth for combat. They surged toward the human vessels in waves that seemed endless. Lieutenant Nick commanded the Sovereign's fighter wing, and he had been waiting for exactly this tactic. He led 400 human interceptors out of the launch bays and met the swarm head-on. "Remember your training," called to his pilots. "They rely on numbers. We rely on skill. Pick your targets and trust your wingmen." Human pilots had trained for years against simulated tactics. They knew every weakness in alien fighter design. They executed maneuvers that they had never seen, rolling and diving through the swarm, while their weapons cut down enemy craft by the dozen. Pilots who had never lost a battle found themselves outmatched, and the swarm that was supposed to overwhelm human point defenses became a slaughter. Alone destroyed 47 enemy fighters in the first hour of combat. When the carriers finally recalled their surviving craft, less than a third returned to their bays. Meanwhile, the collective launched their own attack. Their mineships moved through the battlefield in eerie silence, crewed by thousands of telepaths who shared a single consciousness. They reached out with their mental powers toward the human vessels, trying to invade the minds of the crews and turn them against each other. On the bridge of the Tempest, Captain Ben Carter felt a pressure against his thoughts like cold fingers trying to pry open his skull. His crew reported similar sensations as the assault intensified. But humanity had prepared for this. Every human in the fleet wore neural shielding implanted behind their ears, devices that disrupted telepathic frequencies and protected their minds. They pushed harder and harder, but they could not penetrate the defenses. "Nice try," Carter growled. He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their mineships full barrage." The Tempest opened fire with every weapon it had. Railgun slugs tore through hulls that had never needed heavy armor because their telepathic powers had always ended battles before shooting began. Plasma lances burned through ships filled with thousands of linked mines, and every death sent feedback through the collective that caused the survivors to scream. They had never experienced loss like this. They had never felt thousands of their own die in agony while connected to the hive mind. The shock rippled through their entire fleet, and their coordination began to break down as confusion spread through their shared consciousness. Captain Dawson of the Cyclone saw the opportunity. She had been watching the battle with tactical precision, looking for the moment when the enemy formation would weaken. "All batteries target their supply ships," she commanded. "Cut their logistical lines. Without fuel and ammunition, their numbers mean nothing." The Cyclone carved through the rear of the Coalition formation, where supply vessels and ammunition transports had been considered safe from attack. Human weapons turned these support ships into expanding balls of flame. Coalition warships began to run low on power and ordnance while the battle was still young. Captain of the Thunderbolt took the most direct approach. His ship charged straight into the heart of the enemy formation, where the heaviest Coalition dreadnoughts waited. These were the largest and most powerful alien vessels ever built, crewed by thousands and carrying weapons designed to crack planets. Did not care. He had spent his entire career being told that humans could not match alien firepower. He intended to prove every doubter wrong. "Ramming speed," he ordered with a grin that his crew knew meant someone was about to die. "And keep firing." The Thunderbolt plowed into the Coalition center like a knife into flesh. Its shields absorbed fire from dozens of dreadnoughts, while its own weapons spoke with devastating effect. Enemy vessels exploded left and right as pushed deeper into their formation, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. Captain Laura Price of the Maelstrom patrolled the edges of the battlefield with cold efficiency. Her orders were simple. Nothing escaped. No Coalition ship would retreat to rebuild. No survivors would carry word back to there until humanity was ready. When Coalition captains realized the battle was lost and tried to flee, they found the Maelstrom waiting. Price targeted their engines first, leaving them drifting and helpless. Then her weapons finished the job. Admiral directed the battle from the Sovereign's bridge, watching the tactical display as 3,000 red icons became 2,000, then 1,000, then hundreds. The Coalition had assembled the greatest fleet in galactic history, and it was melting away like snow in summer. Commander reported casualty figures with a voice that trembled with disbelief. "Coalition losses exceed 2,000 vessels. We have lost 12 fighter craft. All 5 Hurricane-class battleships remain fully operational." Coalition commanders began transmitting surrender offers. They pleaded for mercy. They offered to withdraw all claims to human space. They promised reparations and trade agreements and anything else humanity might want. Thought about the colony transport with 17,000 civilians. He thought about 30 years of being called vermin and pests. He thought about every human who had died because aliens believed they could kill without consequence. They had their chance for peace, he said quietly. They chose to treat us as animals. They chose to burn our colonies and murder our people. They called it pest control. He looked at his officers and saw the same cold determination in their eyes. Continue firing. Leave no warship intact. When this is over, there will be nothing left to threaten humanity ever again. The Hurricane fleet obeyed. For 6 hours, they systematically destroyed every coalition vessel that could not escape. Dreadnoughts that had conquered empires were reduced to scrap metal. Carriers that had launched 1,000,000 fighter missions became tombs. Mine ships that had broken the will of entire species burned in the darkness. When the Battle of Nexus Gate finally ended, 3,000 alien warships had been annihilated. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers, a monument to what happened when the galaxy pushed humanity too far. The coalition was finished. The great powers that had dismissed humans as primitives had nothing left, and 5 Hurricane-class battleships turned toward home, completely undamaged and ready for whatever came next. In the weeks following the Battle of Nexus Gate, the galaxy transformed in ways that no species had imagined possible. The old order that had stood for thousands of years crumbled as news of the coalition's destruction spread from system to system. Species that had ruled through fear now lived in terror of what humanity might do next. The Empire was the first to collapse completely. Without their military fleets, the territories they had conquered for centuries rose up in rebellion. Slave species who had lived under claws for generations suddenly found themselves free. They descended into chaos as factions fought each other for control of what little remained. Within a month, the empire that had called humanity pest control had ceased to exist. The species that had been crushed under rule sent messages to Earth. They thanked humanity for liberating them. They offered friendship and alliance to the people who had broken their chains. Admiral read these messages and felt something he had not expected. Pride mixed with sadness, because freedom had come at such a terrible cost. They moved faster than any other species to appease humanity. High Commander N, who had survived the battle only because his flagship had been destroyed early and he had escaped in a pod, appeared before the Galactic Council looking like a broken creature. "We formally withdraw all claims to human space," he announced. "We offer reparations for every insult and every violation we have committed against Earth. We beg humanity to accept our apology and to allow the people to live." Similar declarations came from species across the galaxy. Those who had laughed at human ambassadors now sent their most senior diplomats to Earth with gifts and pleas for mercy. Those who had blocked human trade routes now offered their ports and markets without restriction. Those who had voted against humanity in the Council now sponsored emergency resolutions, granting Earth full membership with all rights and privileges. The collective sealed their borders and retreated into isolation. The hive mind had been fractured by the trauma of losing so many members simultaneously. Reports suggested that the collective was experiencing something like a mental breakdown as billions of connected minds tried to process grief and fear on a scale they had never known. They would not recover for generations. Admiral stood before the United Earth Parliament in a ceremony broadcast across all of human space. The Hurricane Fleet commanders stood beside him. Captain Carter and Captain Dawson and Captain Price. Commander and Lieutenant Bradley and Chief Engineer Porter, and all the officers who had made victory possible. They wore dress uniforms decorated with medals that had been created specifically to honor their service. President Dan Mitchell addressed the assembly with billions watching. He was an older man with gray at his temples and lines on his face that told stories of difficult decisions. He had authorized the Hurricane program 2 decades earlier when he was a young senator, and he had waited all those years for this moment. "For 30 years, we were told we did not belong among the stars," Mitchell said. "We were called primitives and pests. We were told that our colonies could be burned and our people murdered without consequence. We were told that humanity was nothing. He paused and looked at the admirals and captains who had proven those claims wrong. Today, every species in this galaxy knows the truth. Humanity is not prey. Humanity is not a victim. Humanity is a force that will not be dismissed, will not be conquered, and will not be forgotten. The universe belongs to those with the courage to claim it, and we have shown that courage. The Parliament chamber erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very walls. Outside, crowds filled the streets of every human city, celebrating a victory that many had never believed possible. The Hurricane fleet was expanded in the months that followed. 10 more vessels entered production, then 20, then 50. Shipyards worked around the clock to build warships that would ensure no species ever again considered attacking humanity. Human colonies spread across territories that had been to them for decades, protected by vessels that no alien force dared challenge. Scientists and engineers from across the galaxy requested permission to study human technology. Some of those requests were granted and some were. Humanity shared enough to prove they could be generous partners, but kept enough secret to maintain their advantage. The lessons of the past had not been forgotten. On the bridge of the USS Sovereign, Admiral allowed himself a rare moment of rest. The ship was on patrol near the Nexus Gate, which now belonged to humanity. The debris field from the battle had been cleared and monuments erected to mark the site where the old order had ended. Commander joined him at the observation window. They had served together for 15 years, and she knew him well enough to read the thoughtful expression on his face. "You are wondering if it was worth it," she said. It was not a question. Nodded slowly. 3,000 ships, crews from 20 species. Most of them were just soldiers following orders, not the leaders who made the decisions to attack us. They died because their governments made the wrong choices. Was quiet for a moment before she responded. And 17,000 civilians died on that transport. Men and women and children who never wanted to be part of any war. The colonies that burned were filled with farmers and teachers and families who just wanted to live in peace. "I know. We did not start this, Admiral. We tried diplomacy for 30 years. We asked for nothing but respect and the right to exist. They were the ones who chose violence. They were the ones who decided we were pests to be exterminated." Turned to look at her. "I know that too. I just hope we never forget what this cost. Victory is easy to celebrate. The price we paid and the price we extracted should be remembered so that we never have to do this again." Considered his words and nodded. "Then we build a galaxy where this never happens again, where humanity is strong enough that no one dares attack us, but wise enough to use that strength carefully. That is the only way forward." They stood in silence, watching the stars that humanity now owned. Across the galaxy, species that had mocked them now taught their children to respect humans. They studied human history and learned that Earth had spent thousands of years at war with itself. Every weapon humanity had created had been tested in conflicts more brutal than anything aliens had experienced. The galaxy had poked a species that had been forged in the fires of endless struggle. Admiral thought about the future that awaited humanity. They would face new challenges and new threats. Other species would eventually forget their fear and test human resolve again. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that had not yet revealed themselves. But humanity would be ready. The Hurricane fleet would grow stronger. New generations would carry the torch that and his officers had lit. And anyone who thought to threaten Earth would remember what had happened at the Nexus Gate. The Sovereign turned toward home, its mission complete. Behind it, the galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through centuries of history. Humanity had been underestimated. The galaxy had paid the price in blood and fire and total annihilation, and no one would ever make that mistake again.